Welcome back to another live episode of the relationship series talking about the matters of the heart and mind. We are going live a little bit earlier today, so we'll see who joins us. Today's topic is interesting because, whoever's been in a relationship maybe has experienced jealousy to some extent. There's some severe forms of jealousy, and then there's some mild safeguarding forms of jealousy. And I think that it's important to identify when it gets to become out of control and when it becomes more of like a mental health issue as well. And I know you brought this up this week, and we're going to get into a little bit more, Sam. But please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to help support this channel as well. But before we get into it, we have been recapping, how our weeks have been, dealing with the foreclosure of a lot of things. How has your week been, Sam?
My week has been actually very exceptional. I actually had a coaching call tonight with someone, and it helped me to kind of evaluate the fact that a lot of the times in life we can't control necessarily what happens to us, but we always have that capacity to learn how to respond and react by developing very intentional beliefs and the way that we want to view the problem, and then ultimately how we use our body to portray where we go from here. And we had that event that happened in Nova Scotia, and it really just ties into that sort of process. But the week has been really good. I'm sure, like a lot of us, there's just so much uncertainty with the coronavirus and being shut down, and when will things go, come back. And then we had the big oil decline this week that's never happened in history. How that impact the economy, and people are talking, the war bells, sounding, and there's a lot of uncertainty. I'm just really trying to hone in on my capacity to really control how I view what is going on, and really try to stay on the upside of empowerment as much as possible. How about you, G?
Um, Honestly, it's kind of been good in a way. I've been doing things that I've been putting off for a long time. With work, there's a lot of uncertainty too, for sure. However, there's no better time, like I've said before, to create opportunity, and that's what I'm doing. I'm going for it. And whoever's along for the ride, I'm kind of, taking them with me or having a journey with them at this moment. So it's been good. It's been, like you said, uncertain. I'm very fortunate, possibly because I don't have to deal with a lot of uncertainty that other people have to deal with, I guess. So I do have that extra time. But all in all, it's been good. It's been good. So I think, to go back to your point with the Nova Scotia incident, um, there's so many incidences like this that we hear of, maybe that don't end in multiple casualties as such, but there are so many incidences like this because people don't understand how to potentially live or deal with loss. And we've talked about this. It's hearsay whether or not what the media is saying is true regarding this man's fallout with his wife or girlfriend, for that matter. And it leads to a lot of, depressive, anxious, state of mind, which then leads to drastic measures to prove a point. And I truthfully believe that people haven't understood, what we've talked about before. Forever doesn't exist, and it's understanding what to do in the moments when you thought what was forever, and how to deal with the short term and long term instead. Because things will come and go out of your life, jobs, relationships, family members, etc. And it's what to do in those moments. And I truthfully also think that when we lose sight of that part of loss in our life, we've let go completely of who we are. The work that we do within ourselves has been diminished, and we invest so much in someone else that we haven't invested in ourselves. And I think that's huge, 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 huge. And I'm gonna let you go. Keep talking because I want to actually find a quote that I found that kind of resonates with that. But
Would you mind pulling up that article just for people that don't know what we're
sure,
talking about?
sure. There you
Okay, so for some of you who are unaware, there was an incident in Canada today in the province of Nova Scotia where a gentleman killed multiple people. And what it came down to, here's a subtitle: Gabriel Whitman, wife leaving him, may have been Nova Scotia shooting motive, as wife and her boyfriend were initially targeted before random murders with 18 killed. And I know the number is now into 20s. So this is pretty significant here and has made multiple headlines, and really kind of coincides with our topic tonight. And you know really what it comes down, one thing I've learned in my life is there's really nothing negative that can happen unless you attach it to it. Like, so for example, if you're feeling a negative emotion, which a lot of times we attach jealousy to, and it can really have a lot of different sort of portrayals. It can be, with one of the human needs, a lack of insignificance. It could have to do with self-esteem, self-belief, what you have to offer, what life would look like on the other side of, you moving away from your partner or whatever it might be. And really what it comes down to is we have to understand that what matters the most is the interpretation that we create within our own minds of, what we're dealing with. And that ultimately fuels what we're going to believe, how we're going to feel, and ultimately what we're going to do. And so this brings me back actually to a time when I was in my early 20s. And I remember working with somebody who got a phone call that her uncle used a shotgun and killed her aunt. Same sort of situation. So I think really what it comes down to is at some point or another, all human beings have a form of jealousy, where whether it's, looks, fortune, fame, whatever it might be. And I think really, we really touched in on this a while back with a video called The Mirror Effect. And I think if we could just really just take a pause as we're lost in all the commotion and all the hurt and all the pain and the suffering, and just really, one thing I really learned tonight in my coaching call was just take the time to breathe and kind of capture what's going on before you decide to be reactive. And it's the reactivity that a lot of the times triggers us to make the decisions that we regret, that triggers us to make decisions that could haunt us for the rest of our lives. Like literally, this gentleman created a belief that ultimately screwed the rest of his life, his family's life, his kids' life, like his job, his work, everything.
Yeah.
Just because of the interpretation that he created through the experience that he was going through.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts on it, G?
I do. I think people get into a place of destitute where it's like they don't see the end of the rainbow. And they want to create such a stance where people feel what they're feeling, their emotion, because they think to themselves, well, how is it that I'm feeling this and everyone around me is feeling fine? How could this have happened to my life? And this is a quote that stuck with me this week. I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to pull it up. And it says, come back to yourself over and over again until you become the one you've been looking for. We rely on people for so many things. And Esther Perel says it beautifully, where there is no one. And if you're relying on someone to be your everything, you're losing sight of who you are. You're losing sight of your potential, your glow, your purpose. Your investment needs to be in you. First, you are the light which shines from within your environment. If you're not shining, your environment's not going to shine. If you wake up every day, Sam, at 10:30, how do you think your kids are going to behave or react? You have to lead for you in order for your surroundings to lead. I didn't know this man from a hole in the ground. Maybe he was, maybe he had mental health issues. obviously through the statements within, the public, but maybe he wasn't the man that that woman needed. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he wasn't man enough, or maybe he wasn't, pulling his weight somehow. Maybe he was on the other side of the fence, creating more of the chaos within the relationship. There's always factors to it all. And everyone has a choice to enter and exit a relationship. And when people exit, some people don't know how to deal with it. They don't. And the jealousy portion, I think, of course, there was jealousy, but it was so much more than that. There was underlying mental health issues that go beyond, like, there's some basic jealousy things that, couples have, like said, like the safeguarding to make sure, like, hey, you're with me, I'm with you, like, let's forget about all the other kind of things. But it's to the extensive parts, like this is extremely, extremely, extremely extensive, for, if you want to call it jealousy. I think it's a little bit more than that, the severity for sure. But it's not healthy. And I think that when you pull people into, your inability to seek what you need to seek within yourself, I think that is the intrinsic part people need to really look at first.
Yeah, no, I agree. Some very good points. And I just want to just reiterate a quote that I came up with today. And it says, remember, people can't be real when you're not. People can't be there for you when you're not there for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What you believe and see is the reality that you are creating. And once you can learn to change the way you view the world, your whole world will change. You see, jealousy, we have to understand, it's not going to create the most quality of emotions. It's going to create resentment and anger, and it's going to fuel you to want to do things out of spite and loss and so many in-betweens. And I think really what it comes down to is, even in a relationship, especially where, if you're with somebody and they left you for someone else, like, I could understand even people maybe that didn't have mental health challenges could be broken and lost after you spent, 5, 10, 20 years building something in a life where you feel like it was going to be your forever, right? But I think what it comes down to is really just understanding that, Tony Robbins, I was watching one of his podcasts, and he said, you can also love someone enough to also let them go.
100%.
Right? So I think what we need to learn to understand is humans. What we need to learn to understand is how to deal with loss. What we need to learn to do is understand how, when we are struggling and when we are finding that we're getting lost in the grief and the outcomes that we're projecting within our own eyes of what our life is going to look like, then ultimately we can understand how somebody could decide to do something like this when they feel like all their significance is lost, when they feel like all their connection is lost, when they feel like all their fulfillment, their fuel, their passions, everything. Of course, we could understand how, when someone's creating those sorts of mind processes, that they may consider doing something like this. This is never something that should be considered. This is never something that should validate what lack of emotional state or well-being you're in. However, we have to understand one thing. And the one thing is, what triggers us? What makes us do the things we do? And you know what? I think society, education, and everything else in between has really failed in this category to make us really understand how we work, how do we operate it. And once we can get inside, then we can create the world on the outside in a way where no matter what happens to us, it can always be as blissful as possible, always as fulfilling. And no matter what pain you experience, it's always a stepping stone that can move you forward in a direction. I mean, you have experienced pain and suffering. I have experienced tons of pain and suffering. And in that moment, we could have decided to go in a different path.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is no different. I mean, you're talking about a guy who, allowed jealousy to literally destroy and end someone else's life, steal someone else's mother, father, parent, cousin, aunt, uncle, coworker, all on the act of jealousy, which was fueled by such intense emotions that they feel like their loss was irreplaceable. The only way to project and show the world what he was feeling was to take somebody else's life. And we see this happening all the time in schools and so many other, where kids come there and kill other children. I mean, if we could just focus in on this aspect of relationships, which is, the whole purpose of what we're doing, and everything is a matter of the heart and the mind. That's what we do here. Relationship series is matters of the heart and mind. We have to understand that in order to push through things that we don't understand, in order to push through the things that are causing us pain and suffer, we have to connect both of those tools to fuel us out of the fire so that we can see light in some way.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but I want to paint a different picture. Um, and you're right. Society does paint a very fantasized, picture of what everything should look like. And I think that, truthfully, I think the problem is it's the fantasy that people live in. The fantasy of what they're creating to look a certain way, to feel a certain way, to, be responded to in a certain way. And when it doesn't work in their favor that way, they don't know how to deal with it, you know? And I think that as we continue to paint this rosy picture, little girls and little boys watch, these Disney fairy tales about what romanticized love should look like. It's not realistic. And people can't think for themselves and decipher between reality and fiction. And I think that's a problem. I think that people can't understand that, like you've said before, sometimes you grow with people and sometimes you outgrow them. And that has to be okay. You have to get comfortable with the realistic notions that those will inevitably happen in your life. We don't prepare people for that. We don't prepare people for the falls. We we accentuate the fantasy of everything being in the clouds, and it's not realistic. And you're seeing people with more mental health issues because we're not painting a realistic picture for people. Yes, humans have needs, but they also won't be met all the time. That's realistic. You can do your due diligence to understand human behavior and understand that people will come into your life and be complements to those needs, but you're also going to have to understand that people are going to come into your life and they won't be complements, and you have to know when to exit. You have to know when to deal with people exiting, because that's reality. And the more we, you know idealize about fictitious beliefs, you are going to see people react like this, because we are still saying it's okay. We're doing the coddling still. We're still doing the fantasized measures when it doesn't exist. Yes, human behavior exists. Yes, human needs exist. But you have to understand how you need to be a complement and they have to be a complement. And when you match, it's fantastic. And when you don't, you outgrow one another. And that's reality. And people have a hard time understanding that because they live in a unrealistic world upstairs. And that's how I feel about it, because I'm seeing it more and more and more, where people put the expectation on their partner of being a certain way and acting a certain way. And when you're not fulfilling your end of the bargain, but you still expect, then a lot of things go south and people wonder why. So I completely get what you're saying, but I think that we need to help society out by stop coddling people, by stop painting a rosy picture when reality needs to be, it is what it is, right? Like Tony Robbins is very blunt with people. He will call people out in a loving manner, but he will also call people out to, bring them back down to earth, right? The ego doesn't need to be stroked all the time. Sometimes it needs to be brought back
And what is ego? Edging God out.
down. It's a lot of things for people, right? It has a place. It definitely has a place. If you're a business owner, it has a place. You know what I mean? If you're trying to get things done, I get it. It has a place. But when it's living in a narcissistic, you know, overrun body, then it's not serving in any way, of course. But it's people are finding a very hard time balancing loss, right? And what is in their life. But that's my thought. Not to say that
No,
I'm right or wrong.
no. I mean, this is what makes the world go round. I mean,
Absolutely.
you know, I mean, we're in a society today where if you don't, if everyone doesn't believe in black, there's no such thing that could ever be possible to be blue. I think really what it comes down to, and I'm a firm believer in not the left or the right, not liberal or democratic. I'm a contrarian. I'm a political atheist. We need to seek the truth. And I think really what it comes down to, if you want to seek the truth in jealousy, especially in relationships, some of the things that I think, especially when it comes to this, like I think of like, how could have he avoided taking these measures? What could have be done? Who could he have talked to? What are some of the proactive measures and steps that he could have taken to avoid taking such drastic measures to deal with pain that he was dealing with on the inside? And the only way that he could capitulate and formulate in his own mind to show others how much pain he was going through was to take another person's life. So I think really what it comes down to is a few things. I think every human being at some point, and especially in a relationship, will likely experience some jealousy in whatever form that might be. So what are some things that you can do? Let's face it, the majority of you are watching this would probably never take the measures that just gentlemen did. However, jealousy is toxic. Regardless of whatever way you spin it, is going to cause you to believe something and do something and project something that will and always will have a negative consequence. So here are some tools that I recommend to you, and I even do these myself. So some things that you want to do is, number one, start with mindfulness. So create pauses between being reactive. So some things you can do is, number one, and I was doing this even when I was experiencing my anxiety a lot, was just really sitting there with the thoughts and the feelings that you're having. Rather than be reactive, acknowledge that they exist. So in this circumstance, acknowledge the pain that you're going through, acknowledge the feelings that you're having by your girlfriend being with another man, acknowledge all the horrible things that you think are going to happen in your life with this loss, with not being with them, with this person being with your children. Just sit there with it, embody it, and for however long it takes. And then what I think the next step is, and the thing that you should do, is write down how you're feeling. Write down how you're feeling. And then once you get that onto paper, I want you to then say, on the third step is, what power do I have to control in this moment? Not what I can't control, but what power do I have to control? Do you have the power to accept and embrace what is, what the future might hold? Do you have the power to let go and set that person free so you can be free of all the what if scenarios and all the hopeful ideas that you had of what life would have been, how things could have been done differently, what you can do today to possibly change the outcome of the direction of where that person is and moving forward. And then maybe if it's not even at that step and you're just experiencing jealousy at a different form in your relationship, find another way to interpret the message you're sending yourself. It's really just, the mirror effect of insecurities, a low self-esteem, a self-belief that you have within yourself that is projecting this. Because I had a guy who called me today thanking me for a lot of the stuff that I've been doing and saying how it's helped him. And he shared some insights of some things that he was experiencing in his life in very negative ways. And I helped him to kind of shed light with the quote that I said to you earlier, to literally just say, all these things that we're experiencing, all these emotions that this gentleman was experiencing, were literally just showing him all the weaknesses that he had within himself and whatever they might be. And a lot of us are just reactive out of spite because we don't take the time to acknowledge where we're at as human beings, as spiritual beings, as a soul, whatever it might be. And a lot of the times we just, try to take the easy way out and try to cause pain and suffering because we are all trying to make friends. We are all trying to find a way to show people what we're going through. And this is definitely not the right route to go. It is definitely not the right route to go. when you are experiencing jealousy in a relationship and you start to be spiteful and angry and resentful and try to leave little bombs here and there to diminish that person's self-worth, to diminish their freedom, to diminish everything that a relationship should be, which is free and joyful and lustful and happiness and compassionate and fulfilling. And I really feel that, you know, when it comes to jealousy, I really want you to take the time to pause between the emotion that you're experiencing and how you're going to choose to react.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, people try to control what they're, trust me, I've been in a position too where it's like, in every relationship, I'm sure people have gone through where it's like, oh, I wonder what they're doing. Da, 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 da. But one thing you have to get comfortable with, and I think this is, something that is so important for people to understand because you can't control the other person. But what you can control is whatever comes your way, you know what you need to do for you. You have to have a plan whether A or B happens and be comfortable with it. Be comfortable with your decisions. You never want somebody to hide who they really are because then you're controlling that person's makeup as well. You want someone to show you who they really are so you can decide for yourself, A or B. Why do you want to control them? Why do you want to control what they do, their behaviors, etc.? Let them shine. Let them shine so that you can make way and room for what you need in your life. But that's where the work lies with people. They need to understand what they need. They need to understand their strengths. They need to understand their weaknesses. And they need to go from there. Because you're right, Sam. The more comfortable people are with themselves, the more that they value themselves and what they offer, they'll be more comfortable with having A and B as a plan. And I think on that note, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add before we go, but I think what you said was beautiful. Honestly, it's what people need to hear.
Absolutely. And I think another thing I just want to add is you really have to understand your personality type. Like, are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? And yeah, probably a lot of jealousy can be formed when you have those different sort of personalities where someone's very introverted and the other one's very extroverted. They're very outgoing, eventful, very curious. And those could be a lot of roadblocks for you. So I really think what it comes down to, if you are experiencing a lot of jealousy in your relationship, is number one, sit down with yourself and get a piece of paper out and say, what are the things that are causing me the most jealousy in my relationship? Where are they stemming from?
Hmm.
Why do I see this as a problem? And then figure out productive, empowering ways and how you're going to deal with it.
Yeah, 100%. So on that note, is there anything else you want to say before we sign off, Sam?
No, I just, maybe I just want to say, I think we're really waking up every day and having new surprises and new promises that sometimes are being kept and sometimes are being broken. There's a lot of things right now that are completely out of our control. I mean, as a society, as a country, and as a world. And if there's ever a time to learn how to become your own hero and step up to the plate and be a leader in your life, in your family, in your business, in your community, now is the time to do the work.
Hmm. There's no better time, truthfully. You have because there's nothing else you have right now than time. So, on that note, once again, this is the relationship series talking about the matters of the heart and mind. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to just support our channel and its growth. And share this with anybody who you know might be struggling as well. So, we will see you guys next time. Ciao for now.